The streets of Tehran are quiet again, too quiet, not the silence of peace, but the silence that follows fear. A week ago, crowds filled the squares, chanting, defying, calling for the end of a system built in 1979. Today, shops close early, phones go dark, the internet is cut. Nearly 3,000 people are believed to be dead, killed not by war, but by their own state, and hovering above this silence is something else. The shadow of the United States, the memory of last summer's strikes, the threat of another confrontation. This is the paradox of modern Iran, a regime that survives by force, yet fears its own people more than any foreign enemy. If you want to understand where Iran is going next, you have to start here. In this silence, stay with me, because what follows will shape not just Iran but the entire region. And this silence is only the beginning. What we are witnessing is not a single protest. It is a collision of pressures, economic despair, political exhaustion, and a legitimacy crisis decades in the making. The demonstrations did not begin as a revolution. They began in Tehran's bazaars, with prices, with livelihoods, with anger over daily survival. But something changed. Very quickly, economic slogans turned political. Political anger turned existential. Death to the dictator. Down with the regime. This was no longer about reform. It was about rejection. And the response from the state was immediate, overwhelming, lethal. A regime confident in its strength does not shut down the internet. It does not fire on crowds. It does not rule through silence. This moment matters because it exposes a truth. Iran is not only facing pressure from abroad, it is facing a reckoning from within. To understand why this eruption happened now, we have to step back into history, into cycles, into the forces that built this system in the first place. To understand this moment, you have to return to 1979. The Islamic Republic was born from revolution, from humiliation, from foreign interference, from a promise that sovereignty and justice would replace corruption and dependency. For decades that promise sustained the system, even as freedoms narrowed, even as power centralized. But revolutions age and systems calcify. Iran built legitimacy on resistance to the United States, to Israel, to external pressure. Yet over time, resistance abroad replaced accountability at home. Economic mismanagement deepened, sanctions compounded structural weakness, opportunity shrank. Then came war. Last summer's strikes by the US and Israel damaged Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Its regional proxies were weakened. The aura of strength cracked. At the same time, inflation soared. Daily life became harder, and the state could no longer offer either prosperity or protection. This is how systems enter their danger phase. When ideology no longer feeds people and fear replaces consent. The protests did not erupt in a vacuum. They erupted at the intersection of loss. And then one moment changed everything. The turning point came fast, and it came violently. Last Thursday, then Friday. What began as unrest became a national uprising. Cities, towns, streets across Iran. The chants hardened. Death to the dictator. Calls for the fall of the regime. And something new, something unthinkable, until recently, calls for Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the last Shah, for the leadership in Tehran. This crossed a line. The response was absolute. Security forces unleashed force at scale. The internet was shut down. Iran was digitally erased from the world. According to Iran, nearly 3,000 people have been killed, a number that cannot yet be independently verified, but a signal that cannot be ignored. This was not crowd control. It was survival mode. The regime acted like a system that believes compromise is death, and in doing so, it revealed its deepest fear. If you're trying to follow what's happening, pay attention here, because when states choose force over legitimacy, They trigger consequences they cannot fully control. And that leads us to what is happening behind the scenes. What you are seeing is not chaos. It is a system behaving exactly as designed. The Islamic Republic is not just a government. It is a security architecture. Power flows through the Revolutionary Guards, through intelligence services, through networks built to detect, isolate, and crush dissent. This system does not negotiate under pressure. It absorbs pressure. It waits, then it strikes. That is why protests are met with silence, why leaders disappear into prison cells, why the internet goes dark. Repression is not a failure of the system. It is the system. But here is the hidden flaw. A state built entirely on coercion requires constant force to survive. And force is expensive, politically, economically, morally. When legitimacy collapses, every protest becomes existential. Every chant becomes treason. The regime understands this, which is why it responded so brutally. Yet repression creates feedback loops. Fear breeds anger. Anger breeds resistance. And while the streets may be quiet today, the pressure has not disappeared. It has gone underground. And that pressure is about to collide with another crisis. The second crisis is unfolding far from the streets. But it may be even more dangerous, because now Iran's internal unrest is colliding with external pressure. For weeks, Donald Trump issued warnings. If violence continued, there would be consequences. Then suddenly a pause. Trump said killings had stopped. The tone shifted. Diplomacy resurfaced. Behind the scenes, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt urged restraint, not out of sympathy for Tehran, but out of fear. Fear of regional chaos. Fear of a war no one can control. Yet the threat has not vanished. A U.S. carrier strike group is moving toward the Persian Gulf. A reminder, power is still in motion. Iran, weakened by last summer's strikes and stripped of much of its proxy network, is negotiating from its weakest position in decades. This is the dilemma. Strike and risk unifying a fractured nation. Hold back and watch legitimacy bleed away. For the leadership in Tehran, every option is bad. And when states face only bad choices, the cost is usually paid by ordinary people. That is where this story goes next. If you are an ordinary Iranian, this is not a geopolitical chessboard. This is your life. You wake up to silence, not knowing who was taken in the night, not knowing which video will surface next. You worry about prices, about jobs, about whether your phone will work today. And now, you carry something heavier, fear mixed with grief, because the state that promised dignity has shown it will kill to preserve itself. Experts say the social contract is broken, not weakened, broken forever. When a government fires on its own people, trust does not heal. It evaporates. Maybe you loosen dress codes, maybe you offer symbolic concessions. But blood changes everything. If you are watching this, understand what that means. This is not about ideology anymore. It is about survival and memory. History shows that people can endure poverty. They can endure sanctions. They can even endure repression. What they cannot endure is the feeling that their lives no longer matter. If this analysis helps you see the system more clearly, share it, because silence is also a weapon. And the consequences of this moment will not stop at Iran's borders. What happens inside Iran never stays inside Iran. This country sits at the center of fault lines. Energy, religion, great power rivalry. When Iran shakes, the region listens. A weakened Tehran recalculates its role. Its proxies are diminished. Its deterrence questioned. That creates openings and risks. Israel watches closely. So does the United States. So do Gulf states, whose economies depend on stability, not shockwaves. Any miscalculation could ripple outward. Oil markets react, shipping lanes tense, regional militias adjust their behavior, diplomacy too becomes fragile. because negotiating with a state under internal siege is never straightforward. Concessions look like surrender, pressure looks like humiliation. This is how regional crises escalate, not with declarations, but with misunderstandings layered on fear. For years, Iran projected power outward to compensate for weakness at home. Now that balance is breaking, and when a regional power loses equilibrium, the consequences rarely arrive all at once. They arrive slowly, then suddenly, which brings us to the hardest question of all: what comes next? There are three paths ahead, none of them clean. The first is survival through compromise. Iran returns to diplomacy, accepts painful limits on its nuclear program, on missiles, on regional reach. The regime survives, but smaller, weaker, less revolutionary. The second path is stagnation, no reform, no war, just repression on repeat. Protests rise, they are crushed. Again and again, the system endures, but legitimacy continues to decay, quietly, dangerously. Then there is the third path, the most unpredictable: internal fracture, elite splits, power struggles within the security state itself. History suggests this is how entrenched systems really change. Not from the streets alone, but from within. This would not look like 1979. No single moment, no clear victory, just a slow mutation of power. The irony is this: the regime may survive the protests. It may survive diplomacy. What it may not survive is time. And that brings us to the final question: what should you be watching next? The mistake is to think this story is over. It is not. Silence is not resolution. It is pressure waiting to release. Iran's leadership may celebrate anniversaries, play revolutionary songs, project confidence, but beneath the choreography, the foundation has shifted. A state that kills its citizens cannot reclaim moral authority. A system that rules by fear eventually fears itself. If you want to understand the future of Iran, do not focus only on headlines. Watch the fractures inside the security elite, inside the economy, inside the narrative the regime tells itself. History rarely repeats, but it often rhymes. The revolution that built this system was not a single explosion. It was a year of unrest, of pauses, of returns. We may be entering a similar phase now. If this analysis helped you see the bigger picture, subscribe, share it, stay engaged, because what happens next in Iran will not just redefine a nation, it may redefine the balance of power in the Middle East.